Hello and welcome to today's Velocity Kinetics. We're just talking today about a few, I guess you could call it, is it part 4, part 5 of living with a Swace? Sort of a couple of, it's wrong to call it problems with the car, because if it was problems, I wouldn't have bought it, I wouldn't have done how many parts about living with a Swace that I have done. And thank you, by the way, to all those people in the comments who have commented and given me feedback and tips on how to live with the car. And people have asked us general questions. That's been really good. It's been one hell of a week at work, hence the need for caffeine. If only I was sponsored for this, because that would have been a perfect product placement. So Costa and your iced coffees, you're needing someone to promote? I can do it. But anyway, let's talk about a couple of things that have been hard to live with on the Swace. One negative I would have to say on the Swace are the brakes. And I'll explain, but I just wanted to show off the nice sky again. Not a bad way to finish work, although it's been a crap few days, but there we are. So one thing that's been a bit difficult about living with the Swace, combination of, you could write it off as going from manual to automatic is why it's been difficult. I'll drop the clarification between manual and automatic and CVT, because most people, trying to get more people into watching this stuff, need to drop that technicality. So, as it is, the car itself has a pretty decent set of brakes on it, because obviously it hasn't got the gears to slow it down, much like it would have in a in your conventional manual, obviously, or if it had some sort of Tiptronic override, it would be able to slow itself down a little bit better. The problem is, it's finding the bite point, if that makes sense, for the brakes. So, in most cars, you feel a bit of progression as you put the brakes on. Now, again, this might be because I was going from, I'll call the Baleno a low-tech car, in the sense of, as far as I'm aware, it was a throttle cable, brake cable. It wasn't throttle by wire, brake by wire, over the fly, on the fly sort of stuff. It wasn't an electronic throttle body. I don't think it was an electronic brake management. Whereas I think this car is. It's the only thing I can think of, because sometimes the placement of the braking is a bit vague. And it has nothing to do with whether I'm in sport mode, normal mode, or eco mode, as to how vague the brake feeling is. Sport mode, the braking is a little less unpredictable, because in sport mode it's always trying to harness the energy back, and it's a bit more sensitive, whereas in eco mode it's probably a little less sensitive, because you shouldn't be carrying that much speed, or at least as far as it's concerned you shouldn't be. Braking is I try and do it mostly by lift and coast when other cars give me the chance. But when they don't give me a chance, I sometimes feel like I go a long way before I actually come to a stop. Maybe it's because I got so used to not braking that hard in the Baleno and using my gears to get the work done. I'm hoping it's just me just still needing to adjust. But it has proven a challenge, to say the least. Not that the brakes are completely rubbish, though. Far from it. When you step on them, oh my gosh, it really does. You really do feel them come on a lot. But it's been a hard challenge to get used to them. Time for a little Bohemian Rhapsody, gentlemen. That's just I can't really do his accent very well. Mike Myers and Wayne's World. Anyway, something else that sometimes gets annoying in this Swace. So, I've just parked up, got home, nice sunset, again. So, finished my journey, hit the power button. Now, I like that I get this score. Got 85 today on this long journey. And maintain speed, that's a fair common sense feedback today. because of it was a kind of stop-start journey on the way home from Stowmarket. Sort of kept getting to 70, then having to come all the way down to 55 and then to 60. But sometimes it's a little bit flawed, and let me explain. So talking about that score at the end of every journey, it's really good. Helps you try and work out, like, oh yeah, actually I did have to brake quite hard here. I could have planned a bit more ahead. Should have used my mirror or those mirrors, wing mirrors, to aid the braking. Maybe I could have lifted and coasted a little bit. I have to add an asterisk to this score thing, because a lot of my commuting at the moment is a very short journey. In terms of miles, it's only 5 miles one way, and most of it through town. So if something happens, it's one of these things, you only need one thing to mess up the score, because it averages out over your journey. But sometimes I'm not completely sure it's accurate. There have been times where I feel like, from my position behind the wheel, that I've had to press the brakes a lot and quite firmly, which doesn't do your miles per gallon very many favours. But it's come out with high scores. There have been times where I feel like I've been super gentle and it comes out with low scores. Now, I appreciate, I don't know what software it's using to make those decisions. So whether it's a flaw in the software, it's like, no, actually, you were harder on the brakes on those other journeys. I can only tell you what I feel from my position behind the wheel. Like I say, some people say it's just a number. Don't pay attention to it. It's a bit like an AHT in a call centre. Unless you're deliberately fucking around, so long as you can justify why you're working to your AHT or why your AHT is that, you can't really comment on it. And I get that. It's more than fair. I find it annoying at times. And there have been times where the car's been sport mode and I've been really going for it, and it's come out with a high number, which, again, to me, it didn't seem very good. But then again, maybe it was harnessing a lot more electric. It's sort of one of those things, I guess it's ultimate flaw. If you're going to take the number seriously, and this is a massive if you're going to take the number seriously, and you don't have to take the number seriously at all. But if you take the number seriously, then it shows just how much other people mess up the number. So, for instance, if I've got a car right up my trumpet, I can't lift and coast to slow down. I need to, at the very least, tap the brakes enough to bring the lights on, which in turn, whilst it might all eventually go back into the electric system in the car, I can't slow it down as slowly as I would like to slow it down. And likewise, when people want you to get a move on, it's like, well, I can't make the car go faster than it wants to go. And that's the same regardless of whether you're running hybrid, diesel, petrol, hydrogen, electric. If the car's not ready to go, you can't, without potentially doing a lot of damage, force it to get up and go. I just realised, geez, in this picture I look like I've slapped loads of weight on. I thought I was going the other way. Sorry, vanity moment aside. Anyway, there are times where other people's driving affects your score. And it's sort of, again, proof of, again, if you take that number seriously, I'm going to put my coffee down because I've got visions of that going everywhere in a minute. If you take that number seriously, everyone needs to drive better. And like driving out of the village I live in on the country road heading that way. Actually, there's no point in me pointing because you don't even know what direction that way is. Anyway, but heading out the village, the number of times people come flying up that road faster than 60, or at least it feels faster than the 60 it's supposed to be, and then positioned, not even positioned on the left. I can understand if you think you've got, if you're, say, for instance, going down there at 4 o'clock in the morning and you thought there's going to be no one around, maybe get away with straddling both lanes. Personally, I'd say stay in the left. Stay in the designated lane you're supposed to be in, because you don't know what's coming around the next corner. But that's a philosophical argument in many ways, not one that will always not one we'll always get to the bottom of, or at least agree on. But the number of times I have to dive suddenly to the left because people aren't in position, and you'd be amazed. It's not always the big 4x4s. They don't bloody help. Someone in this village has got the massive, is it an X7? It's the big one up from the X5. And the number of, even with the Balena, the number of times I thought we were going to trade paint. We have US Air Force nearby, and I think they've been doing bombing runs. Training bombing runs. Certainly been a few C-130s doing weird things recently. A couple of them are doing that pivot flying in a circle test, but anyway. On country roads, you're always going to be at a disadvantage, and I freely accept that. Again, it doesn't matter what you drive. To get the best out of it, you're always going to be a disadvantage of it. But it's also in places like in town, people pulling out of nowhere, and even if you've observed, and you could, even a pro driver, be like, you could not have observed any more. That person's just been a complete dick. There is only so much that you can do. Only so much preparation you can think of. And I suppose it comes around to the argument of this is why autonomous cars will be what dictates the future. But it's really hard, if you're going to take that little score seriously, to do well when it's busy. It's probably the best way I can put it. It's hard to do well when it's busy. It's hard to if it was taken seriously. It's hard to do what the car wants, because it's not always. I'm not always sure what it wants. There are days where I've lessened my acceleration, and it still says I'm accelerating too hard. There are days where I've gone for it because I'm late, and there's a big gap on the A14 to get on. I'm just going to hoof it. Or it's a case of it's been a bad day. This is where I'd take it out of my gearbox and the Balena. I'm just going to floor it and see what happens in this. And again, there have been times I've done that and I've got a high score. So I honestly don't know what to do. But it is, like I say, it's not a fault. But one of those things, when you look at it over time, it's actually can get a little bit annoying. Looking out the rearview mirror isn't always the easiest. It took me a while to get this placed. It's a combination of, it's not the mirror itself that's a problem. It's the window on the back of the car that is the problem. So, the way Toyota designed it, it's not got an awful lot of glass for an estate car. That said, there was an article I read a long time ago when Volvo replaced the V70. They did a massive redo. The litre capacity for the back of the car is measured below the window line. So the back of that V70 was very glassy and had quite a low capacity on the official figures. But actually, when you factored in the glass, it actually had the biggest capacity, or one of the biggest capacities in class. But it's not the easiest. And then if I had someone sat in the middle seat, it would be a bit difficult to do it. Like I said, I can live with it, especially when it's just me and Sarah. And if there's someone sat, the problem becomes if you've got a family of 5 and 3 children, so you have one that would sit in the middle. That is where that starts to become a little bit of a problem as they would get older. So I'd say an 8-9-year-old would start to become a little bit difficult to view, at least view your rear view mirror from there. That's a small thing, but not the end of the world. One thing I've also thought of with this car, it's a very nice car. Well, front end maybe could be a little bit nicer. Some days I really like it. Some days I think I prefer the Toyota approach on the front. But you're behind the wheel all the time. It doesn't really matter. Someone's asking me about my driving experience with these in the comments. I'll put his name here when I find it, but he was asking about some of these dots on the front, whether these were for parking sensors or not. And that does got me thinking. It is a really nice, really good car, loaded with tech for its price. And when I bought it, I should clarify actually, when I bought this car, it had £3,000 off it. So some people were talking about, why don't I buy the Toyota, aside from trade-in value on my Baleno. It was, I think I got this for 22 and a half. I got this car for brand new. And it was meant to be in blue originally. I saw one in blue in the showroom the other day. I had to go up there for something, but anyway. I did mention in passing, like, I'm not sure whether there are parking sensors on the SZ2 or the SZ5. But thinking about it, as we walk around the car, it is quite a long car nose to tail, and it is a challenge to get it up and around there. And especially since I'm being very careful because I don't want a repeat of the bumper damage. But if you think about it, it's got the reversing camera on, which is fantastic, and I probably am a little too reliant on it at times. But it is quite a long car to not have front or rear parking sensors. I can understand not having both, but I'm surprised it doesn't have a set of them, even if it's just on the front. Because you've got your reversing camera at the back to help you, so maybe, you know, just to make it all trippy. It's a bit of a weird one, if I'm honest. And yeah, I'd have thought it would have had some on. And I hadn't thought about it until I chat with that gentleman in the comments. One thing I flatly don't like about this car, and this would be the same regardless of whether it was a Swace, Suzuki, Toyota, whether it was a Ford, a Volkswagen, a Mercedes. I don't like where this is placed. Now, we obviously did a video a little while ago about where the USB slot is for Android Auto, and that is fine. But it's just not in a great place. And I was giving my brother a lift the other day. His legs are a bit on the long side because he's a bit taller than I am, but it's sort of, I'm sure he was nowhere near it. But to the corner of my eye, it looked like he kept having to move his leg to avoid touching it. Though to be fair, it'd be quite an achievement to actually tap that. But anyway, I don't like where it's placed. Now, obviously, you can see I keep stuff down here. Got my Torch of Dreams. It's where I keep my parking things and a couple of other ends. So maybe it will work better if I start actually putting my phone down there. However, I am occasionally a forgetful person when I get out of the car. I don't always remember to take my phone out when I've used it on Android Auto. I guess I'm gonna have to, because when I put it in down here, it sort of jiggles a lot. Obviously, though, I've got my cable for my dash cam, and yeah. And to be honest, I'm not sure why there isn't a cigarette lighter down there for that sort of thing to plug into. And I don't really want to start taking the roof lining off or paying someone to do it just for a little bit of cable management that is managed just through that. I mean, it's an okay arrangement in total because we've also got another USB in there which you could charge off and things. But I'm surprised that one isn't also capable for Android Auto. But there we are. I guess it's more a case of I think as I covered in my initial video about when I found the Android Auto slot, frustration of where that is. It's just not the first place you would look without looking in the manual. And let's be honest, how many of us go home and read the instruction manual for a car when you buy it? I don't. My dad hasn't and doesn't. The only time he did is when he went from manual to automatic fully. I didn't when I did this. Rightly or wrongly, probably should have done with the number of toys I got. But yeah, not my favourite, to say the least. But again, obviously Suzuki are at the mercy of how Toyota do things. So really, for this to be improved on the Swace, it needs to be changed on the Toyota. I guess I'm just going to have to get in the habit of using that shelf and remembering to take my phone out of the car. Like I said, the number of times I walked into work and be like, I haven't got my phone on me, which is quite important because I've been deputising where I am at the moment, and I often have to take calls from senior managers. So, not the greatest. There is something else that's causing me a little bit of concern with this car at the moment. But again, this has a massive asterisk next to it because I don't know how much of it is me, how much of it is the car, and how much of it is other circumstances. I'm not getting the greatest miles per gallon out of it. And given it's advertised at being able to get something like 64, I'm only getting 50.8 as of bringing Sarah home this morning. So we're 15 down. Now bearing in mind on the Baleno I was only 4 short on its official listing at one point. It's a bit of a concern. However, we come back round to that thing with my commute only being mostly 10-mile return, 5 miles one way, 5 miles back, mostly through town, a lot of stop-start traffic. Those people know Bury St Edmunds at the moment. At the time of this recording, it is the 4th of March. With most of Bury St Edmunds being dug up for roadworks in various places, it's yeah, a challenge to get through that stop-start, stop-start, stop-start. When I do my days in Stowmarket, which is 20 miles away, one way, the miles per gallon starts to go up. And on days where I have to pick Sarah up from a night shift in the morning, then carry on to my work, which is 15 miles return back here, and then I've got so I do 20 mile that way in total. That starts to make the car come back on its numbers. But it's been disappointingly low. It also some days seems to drink fuel, which is a problem, especially at the current cost. At the time of recording, when I went to Sainsbury's yesterday, that was £1.43.9 a litre. Tesco's £1.47.9. The Esso garage on Tollgate Lane was £1.52.9 a litre for petrol. Not sure about diesel. Diesel was all about £1.51 to £1.55 in most of those places. But the fact it's not getting as good a return as it could, it's not proving very helpful to my wallet. And when I had to fill this up from virtually empty, I had 13 miles left on, at least according to the range, because I had 13 miles left when I filled it up. It cost me nearly 60 quid to fill it up from empty. I've only been at work 4 days and taken Sarah to work twice. And I've got just about half a tank left. Doesn't seem right, but it only seems to be a 40 litre fuel tank, which for a car this size, I would have thought more like 50-55 litres would have been the case. Unless there's some sort of reserve tank underneath that I've just never caught into, and it actually is about 50-60 litres if you let it go into reserve. Which, that I know of, I don't think I have. But, yeah. A lot of things that could do with changing, improving. But in May, my normal place of work closes, or at least my current place of work closes, and my daily work will be in Stowmarket. So this will probably start to pay itself back then. But that's an awful long time to wait. You might sit there and think that I'm just being super negative on this video. It's not a case, because I'm going to do another video about plus points about the Baleno. I should have done one about that years ago. Actually, I did. But plus points about this Swace. And when I can get some time off, where I haven't got things to do, like a lot of people, not a lot of availability for holiday. When you do get time off, a lot of other stuff has to go in those slots to get jobs done. But I will be doing a video driving this around. Just depends on who's off to help for what I want to do. There's a lot of positive about this car, and like I said, I'll go through a lot of features I do like in another video. But the features I've mentioned in this video, they're ones that, like I say, I don't dislike, as in it's not enough for me to say, oh, I wish I'd never bought one. Far from it, especially the price I bought this for. Ooh, pheasant. I'm going to stop this and do some pheasant watching. I don't know where the pheasant went. He went down the fence just a near where I turned the car around, and then he ran through it. So I don't know how he's done that, but I think there's a gate down there that he's hopped through, but I can't see him now. He sort of ran in front of my car and disappeared. Unless he's gone behind, but again, I can't see him in any of my mirrors. But yeah, there's a lot I like about this car, and like I said, I'll do another video about why I like it so much. These are a few things that maybe Suzuki/Toyota need to think about for the next generation of one. That's assuming Suzuki continue the platform sharing. Because speaking to one of the guys down at the dealership, the Baleno chassis has been shared with a Toyota, but not. I don't think it's a European Toyota. The Baleno engine's being shared with some Toyota models somewhere. This has obviously come over here as a Swace. We've got the A-Cross, which is a Toyota RAV4 in disguise. It's a good way for Suzuki to keep its market going. But, yeah. I said these are a few niggles. That they're not. It's nothing that you can't live with. Far from it. The numbers on the on your drive score, not the app drive score, the score of your driving on this car. Those numbers are nothing really to live by. Unless you're consistently getting low numbers, then really don't worry. It's just more because I'm an overthinker, and having worked in call centres and been taught to always look at numbers like that, you know, hard for me not to let old habits go. The other thing, like the slot for the USB, really, it's not the end of the world, especially if you just use the tray that's been built for a phone. I suppose, let's say, I suppose I should start using it for that. It's just not always what I think of to do. To be honest, most of it is just habit, the way I go about things. The brakes, like I say, I'm sure I'll get used to it in time. The miles per gallon, again, more journeys, more time, that will start coming in my favour eventually. But, and like the rearward vision, it's not the nicest, but again, really, as long as you can see people and you've got your wing mirrors, you can live with it. But anyway, ooh, that's hitting the right spot. This has been an episode of Velocity Kinetics. Stay tuned for a short little extra on the end of this video. You might want to grab your tissues. If you don't want to stay for the next 10-12 minutes, then drive safe, look after yourselves. So just a short ending to today's video. As you may have seen a few weeks ago, there was a post saying that Russ had passed away. And some people might not know how I knew Russ and why he was so important to Velocity Kinetics. So I'll briefly explain why. Years and years ago, and I believe I was still living with my friend Mikey at this time when we were students, I saw an opportunity on Twitter posted by James Allen to write for a blog he was starting that came through a thing called Sport Right Now, and is written by using a platform called Storyfy. We'd link social media posts into your article, so you could search Twitter for God knows what, Flickr, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, you could put it into your post. I chose to write about the Williams F1 team, actually, and a couple of times I inserted posts from road race parts, which was Russ just running his own page at the time on Twitter. Whenever you published your article on Storyfy, it would notify people that you'd written and used their bits. Now, I got the short end of the stick with this a couple of times. I think it was is it F1 Technical? It used to be F1 race fans, but they had a go at me for using pictures without their permission. But my argument with them always was, well, you've gotten the credit, and I haven't claimed credit for the picture. It's got your tweet in it. But anyway, I quoted Russ a few times, and we sort of got chatting back and forth on Twitter. This must be 2010 area, 2010, 2011. So I've kind of known Russ a very long time. He was an American, quite a lot older than myself. He would often give me feedback on how my writing went, and said I had legs to do my own thing, that I should maybe consider doing that instead of my degree, because back and forth, because it went from sort of Twitter back and forths to email back and forths, and then talking more about different things. He had an interest in Jaguars. He had a Jag XK, XK8, I think it was, sort of the model that was around about the year 2002, I think. Certainly it was that sort of shape, XK8. He had an interest in electric cars and hybrid cars and new tech, for cars, that is, and I had a similar interest in it as well. And, you know, we developed quite a great back and forth over the years. We then started talking about doing our own blog together on the back of, could it have been the F1 Times? Might have well been. I don't know if they still exist anymore. But back then there was something called the F1 Times. You get this email. It was like a PDF document that turned the pages, a bit like a page tiger document almost. We thought, well, you know, maybe we could eventually step up and step out to doing that sort of thing, and what we would cover. And then eventually I started running my own blog called Pure Racing Fuel, because the other place I used to write for, Netcars, had sort of disappeared. I don't think I officially stopped writing for them, but I wasn't putting out a lot of content for them. So pureracingfuel.wordpress.com still exists. It's where I've got a lot of my old stuff. There's sort of nowhere for it to go. And he had started a blog, Velocity Kinetics. Some of his original posts are quite old, and if you go all the way to the bottom of our WordPress page, you can see him talking about the Honda hybrid unit that they were going to potentially put on what became the Brawn car, when it was still going to stay the Honda car. So he and I have done loads of things together. Velocity Kinetics is sort of the brainchild of... Ultimately, it is Russ's brainchild. I'm the one who has done nearly all the content for it since it went to YouTube, basically. I don't think he put anything out when I sort of took it on. He sort of gave me ideas for things to talk about. Admittedly, not that I always did what he suggested, and with hindsight, maybe I should have done. We might have had a few more views, or we might have had a few more subscribers, or what have you. But ultimately, Velocity Kinetics has always been a place to talk cars, talk motorsport, talk car technology, that sort of things that makes us like cars, really. And I knew he'd been ill for a while, and I think they were hopeful that he would get better for a long time. And then it was a case of, you're just on borrowed time. There is an end. We can't tell you when an end is, as is often the case with cancers. We know there's an end date. We just can't tell you when the end date is going to be. And it's wrong to say his involvement in Velocity Kinetics had dwindled, because it hadn't. Because he'd often, some of the comments that have been replied back to, he's done it, not myself. I had fallen out of touch a little bit with him, but obviously he needed to make the best of what time he had left in the last few years. And he occasionally did let me know through a Facebook message or an email that he thought everything was going good, and that I could go far with it we find the right model for Velocity Kinetics. And I feel quite bad really, because I'd not messaged him for a little while, and I messaged him because I was like, I hadn't heard from him for a few months. I was concerned that he died and hadn't heard anything at all. So I sent him a message just saying, hope he's okay. Is he still at home? Because one time he messaged me, he mentioned he might possibly have to go into hospice care and things like that. And I left it as, if you want to chat anything cars, just let me know. And that was on the 27th of January, I think it was. And about a week later, he had died. We found out, his wife put a post on his Facebook page about 2-3 weeks later. The post I put on Velocity Kinetics was about 2 or 3 days after I found out. And I have to say, it's really odd to feel quite emotional over someone you'd never met in person, never spoke to over the phone. I'd read things he'd written for his Mule Shoe Salient blog, which I understand, my limited understanding, it was to do with American Civil War manoeuvres. I'd read things he'd sort of semi-written, well, he'd not semi-written, he'd obviously written them, but you know what I mean. As in things like, he'd written some sort of story in his Facebook post for a little while ago. It was like almost like a book he was kind of writing through, and it was really, really good. And he was meant to be getting published again with something American Civil War related. So, like I say, it's hard to get. On the one hand, it seems silly to get emotional over someone who you never met, and only ever dealt with through emails and things. But to my 20-21-year-old self, and bearing in mind in 2.5 months I'll be 32, so I've known of him nearly 12 years, 12, maybe 12.5 years at the most. I'd always planned to go meet him if I ever got a chance to get over to the States, because I've got a friend who lives down in LA. I was going to take a trip to Virginia to see him. It's sort of really hard to say what we feel and things, but he sort of, when I was 2021, I was doing a sociology degree in Teesside up in Middlesbrough, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I always knew at that time I always wanted to join the police, but obviously cuts in the UK government, we're not going to get political with it, but basically the UK government at the time had this whole thing for cuts, and in a nutshell, police forces just dwindled and recruitment just tailed off. So I was in a little bit of I actually have no idea what I'm going to do. He gave me some sort of belief that I could do this, whether that's sort of in adoptive son kind of way, or whether that's just in a one good friend to another, whatever his motives were, I don't care, as in I don't want to know what they are. It was just very, very nice that some stranger from another country was like, no, you got it, you can do something with this. And I plan to keep running Velocity Kinetics as long as I'm able to do so, as long as it's content, as long as I have the drive to do it, and everything along those lines. But without Russ, there would have been no Velocity Kinetics. We would have never started. It would probably be called Pure Racing Fuel, if it ever got started at all. I've sort of needed his direction, probably the best way to put it. Now, I know this is a long ramble about Russ at the end of what might be a very long video, but I have to say thank you, Russ, for everything. Rest in peace, good buddy. All the car talk, all the Formula 1 talk, Formula E, Trans Am. It was him that got me a passing interest in Trans Am. Not anyone else. There's nothing else really to say, but thank you, buddy. Rest in peace, Russ.